Thank you, Sandy. And I'd like to say bienvenidos a todos. Welcome to you all. Before we get started, there's something I want you to think about as you're listening to these stories and experiences. And I'm always looking for these things, whether it's on a news show or in the Kansas City Star, but recently there was a really interesting editorial, and I don't know if any of you all saw it, but it's another aspect of what's going on with the political rhetoric that we're seeing and hearing in our presidential campaign. And it had to do with its impact on children and teachers in schools. I don't know if any of you saw that, or if any of you are teachers or retired teachers. And it's something I maybe should have thought about in all of this, but it's the impact that it's having on teachers, and maybe 40% of them not wanting to even talk about the presidential campaign in their classrooms. So there goes learning about civics and campaigns, and you can understand that. But the more disturbing factor is that children, and whether they're recognizable immigrant children or refugees or just children of color, are being targeted, are being bullied. You know, we work so hard on anti-bullying campaigns in our schools. And now here we are in a situation where that bullying has really escalated. And these children are fearful. Are they going to be deported? You know, is it going to impact their places of worship? It's just another aspect when we talk about refugees and immigration that I think we need to think about. And the things that we say and what we hear and how that impacts our schools and our children and their families. So be sure to think about that. It may come up again as we move forward. And now the reading glasses, of course. So I can tell the players in the program. But it is my pleasure to introduce, on my left, Rachel Pollock. We just met. We may have seen each other, but we just met for the first time tonight. And she's with Catholic Charities, Refugee, and Migrant Services, and has worked with refugees of Kansas City for 10 years. She currently oversees resettlement, citizen education, New Routes for Refugees, an initiative, La Luz Immigration Clinic, and the Wyandotte County Emergency Assistance Center with Catholic Charities, and I'm sure many other things that you'll hear and learn about. And I'm going to have her introduce Johan, since she's been working with him, and welcome, Johan. It's also my pleasure to introduce Catalina Velarde. We work together on the AIRR board. Catalina is currently the chair for that organization, and she's an immigration attorney with Austin and Ferguson. And she specializes in humanitarian relief for immigrants. She has volunteered for women and children that have been detained in New Mexico, that you've heard about being detained in New Mexico and Texas. And there are attorneys who are volunteering their time to go down there and help women and children who are seeking asylum. And you'll hear a lot more about that. And you'll unfortunately learn some astounding things about the way those women and children are being treated, but also how these volunteer attorneys are being treated. She migrated from Ciudad Juarez at age 11 and became a U.S. citizen as a junior in high school. In addition to community presentation, she writes a column for Tumas Tu KC and is active with her alma mater, UMKC School of Law. So welcome to all of our panelists. And just to let you know, and we'll probably announce it again, once they complete the presentation, we're going to be passing out cards for questions, so be looking for that. Okay. And I believe we're going to start with Rachel. Yes.
This on, oh yeah, it's on now. Okay, is that good? Loud enough? Okay, great. Well, again, thank you for having us. I'm really happy to be here tonight. I'm going to talk about the U.S. Refugee Resettlement Program, a little bit about our work at Catholic Charities, a little bit about how the resettlement program works, and I also have some handouts on how kind of the road leading up to someone being resettled in the United States. So I'm going to talk for about 15 minutes about those topics, and then I'm going to introduce Johan, who is, maybe I'll introduce him now. Johan is a member of our staff, a member of my team at Catholic Charities. He is a reception and placement case specialist. Reception and placement is the U.S. program for refugees for their first 90 days in the U.S., and Johan also is a resettled refugee himself. He's been in the U.S. less than a year. So I'm going to let him talk at the end for about 10 minutes, just kind of sharing his story with you. And yeah, that'll be our portion of the evening tonight. So really quickly, refugee resettlement, refugees has been in the news a lot. And a lot of people still don't know what that means. So a refugee is someone who has been forced to flee their country of origin in order to escape war or persecution. And the number of refugees in the world continues to grow every year. And wait a second. Ideally, someone becomes a refugee when they cross a border and flee into a neighboring country. If someone's just in their country of origin but has been forced to flee their home, they're considered an internally displaced person, or an IDP. That's another term that you hear in the news. So when someone flees their country, crosses an international border, they legally become a refugee. And there are kind of three options for those folks. The preferred option is that peace would return to their homeland and that they would be allowed to go home, return to their way of life, return to their community. The second option is that, sounds like it's thundering out there. So we're in a basement, right? So, so the second option is that folks are able to integrate into the country that they've traveled to. So for refugees coming from Burma into Thailand, maybe a small percentage of those folks have been able to integrate into Thai culture, maybe receive documentation, so they're able to work in Thailand. That percentage is pretty small, but usually that culture is pretty similar, or more similar than flying to a whole another part of the world. They might even have a shared language, or groups of people that speak their language. So those are the first two options, which are preferred. The third option is kind of the last case scenario for folks, and that's the option of resettlement into a third country. And that option is afforded to less than 1% of the world's refugees. It's a really small percentage of folks. The U.S. resettles refugees, and we have been in the past the largest refugee resettlement country in the world. Lots of other countries do take people in as well, but our numbers have been higher. We've kind of historically been the world leader in refugee resettlement, although we'll see what happens in the future. This year, the United States, our goal is to resettle 85,000 refugees. Last year, we resettled about 75,000 refugees, and our goal for the coming year is 100,000 refugees, which sounds like a huge number, and it is a lot of people, but compared to the population of our country, it's pretty small. So the U.S. program is overseen by the State Department. They oversee the vetting process, they oversee the placement process, and then they contract with 10 voluntary agencies that oversee resettlement at local affiliates like us at Catholic Charities. So there are 10 organizations that sit around a table every week and allocate refugees to come to different parts of the country. So you have probably heard of some of them. IRC, International Rescue Committee, does a lot of work overseas, and they're growing their resettlement presence here in the United States. There is an Episcopal group. Jewish Vocational Service in Kansas City, Missouri, works under a voluntary agency called U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants. So there's these 10 kind of organizing groups that work with local affiliates like us. Catholic Charities works under the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. They're our voluntary agency in DC. So USCCB is contracted with the State Department, and then we contract with them. So that's kind of how I get a lot of questions from people about how kind of that process works. And we are paid on a per capita basis for the folks that we resettle. We get about $2,000 per person. $900 of that goes to the agency, and then about $1,100 of that goes to the client themselves directly. Whoa. So that is money that goes directly to them to pay for housing, utilities, all of their initial needs, and the idea is that money is to carry them through until they're self-sufficient. So it goes pretty quickly. Especially if you're a single person, I think that's a lot of times the most difficult. If you're a family of 6 and you have $6,000, that'll carry you through a little bit longer. So we're contracted with USCCB to provide services to refugees for their first period of time in the United States. And I mentioned a program called Reception and Placement. That is kind of the initial, we call them core services. So those are things like picking refugees up at the airport, coordinating housing. We work with a network of landlords to provide safe and affordable housing for refugees. That includes getting the kids enrolled in school, getting immunizations and a health screening for everyone, applying for a social security card. The list goes on, just kind of the standard things that you would think about, helping people apply for benefits in the state if they're eligible for that. And we provide those services initially. The next thing that we provide is our learning center. And we have kind of a 3-tiered approach in our learning center for refugees. We offer English classes, cultural orientation classes, and then education on employment. We call it Job Day, because employment norms are really different in the United States than a lot of the places that folks are coming from. So refugees get enrolled in those services, and they keep working with us. Through case management and employment, they can work with us for up to 5 years. Most of that work happens in the first year. Usually after 1 year, we're not seeing folks a lot through our office. We're only seeing them come in if they have a big, an emergency and they need help navigating it, or they, have a big financial situation, or they get in a car accident. Most of our work happens in that first year. And we work a lot with employers throughout the area. In the last year, we had about 250 refugees that we placed in jobs. And we're working with really diverse networks of folks, always looking for new employers, people that are willing to be patient and take a risk that usually pays off with great dividends, and hiring somebody that's really excited to be in the United States and work. And refugees are legal permanent residents. They're eligible for Social Security card, they're eligible for their green card after a year, and they're eligible for citizenship after 5 years of being in the United States. So I get a lot of questions about that too. Catholic Charities, every year we resettle anywhere between 200 and 400 refugees in the Kansas City, Kansas, and Johnson County area. Last year was our biggest year to date, and we ended up at 391. This year it'll probably be more like 250 folks. So we're kind of a mid-sized site. JVS is a lot bigger than us over on the Kansas City, Missouri side. They usually do between 500 and 600 folks a year. And right now, most of our cases are from Burma. So, last year about 85% of our cases came from Burma. About 5% came from Bhutan, 5% from Iraq, and then a few other, families, random. Just people from Somalia. We even had some Hmong cases, and we haven't done Hmong resettlement in like 20 years. So that was really surprising when we saw that come through the pipeline. We're like, oh, what language do they speak? But usually most of our cases right now are coming from Burma. That will likely change as populations shift over the next few years. Like Cathy said, I've been working in resettlement for 10 years. When I first started, we were working with a lot of folks from Africa, and then people from Burma started coming, and we've been working with them solid for about the last 7 years. The newest populations that are coming into the United States are folks from the Congo, and then we're anticipating some folks from Syria. The federal government has a goal of bringing in 10,000 Syrian refugees over this fiscal year. So of that 85,000, the goal is 10,000 to be from Syria. We haven't really seen, I think so far only 1,200 people from Syria have been admitted to the U.S. And we've received 2 families from Syria in Kansas City. All of the cases currently that we're resettling are called U.S. tie cases, meaning they've indicated that they have a relationship with someone in Kansas City, and we've verified that relationship, so they're coming to reunite with that person. And that's something, when I first started, that was not the case. We were receiving refugee cases that were not coming to reunite with someone. They were called free cases, but now we have resettled so many folks, primarily from Burma, that they're connected with family and friends, and they're wanting to come and reunite with them. The next thing I wanted to briefly talk about was our citizenship program, and our citizenship program has connected with the League of Women Voters, and I'm not sure if it's the Johnson County one or not. Does anybody in here know? You know? Yes, it's you? Awesome. It is? Okay, great. Tracy Fuller is our citizenship program manager, and we, about a year and a half ago, we received a grant from USCIS to hold both citizenship education and then free naturalization prep, so N400 prep with folks. So we have been undertaking some serious citizenship work over the last year and a half. Our goal for that grant was to, by the end of 2 years, to help 220 people apply for citizenship. And the grant finishes at the end of this September, and we're already over 300. So it's been very busy. And maybe that's something that would be of interest to you all. Through the grant, we're able to provide that service free of charge for folks. They would still, if they're not eligible for the fee waiver with USCIS, they would have to pay that, but they don't have to pay attorney fees with us, and that's regardless of income. So if you know of anybody that would be interested in that, you can send them our way. And we also have pretty robust citizenship prep classes. We use a lot of volunteers to do that. So we have citizenship classes every day of the week during the daytime, and then on Tuesday evenings. And those are a quarter in length, they're 10 weeks in length. And we generally have anywhere between 50 and 75 students that are coming to those classes. So we're looking for volunteers all the time. It's a really fun place to volunteer, and you'll get to work if you do come. We have a teacher that's always there on staff, and then you work in a small table of refugees or immigrants. It's open to any type of immigration, anybody that's eligible for citizenship. And you get to work with them one-on-one. And the thing that we've partnered with the League of Women Voters is, we've got all these folks that are becoming citizens, and we want to make sure that they know what to do. Once they register to vote, that they understand what their right is, what the process is like in the United States. So we've started some citizenship education. I think we've just done one so far, but Tracy said it went really well. So we're really excited to have that partnership with you all. So that's kind of all that I've prepared in terms of remarks. I wanted to give some information on kind of what leads, the steps that people have to go through in order to be eligible for resettlement in the United States. And I think the easiest way to do that is just through this infographic that we've created. I think it's kind of boring for me just to talk about all the steps, and I'm a visual learner. So I made a bunch of copies of this. I'll have this up here at the front afterwards. And then next I just wanted to give Johan some time to just talk with you about himself. So welcome, Johan.
Hi, my name is Johan, and my last name is Hmong. So you can call me Johan Hmong, or you can call me Hmong. You can call me Johan as well. Well, I'm from Burma, and this is like my 8th month in America. And well, before I really go into like what I'm going to talk about, I would like to let you know that I'm going to look at my phone like frequently, because I'm not a very good English speaker, and I have written down some notes, and I'm going to take a look at it. And well, I've never imagined in my life that I would be able to use an iPhone, and since the organization is giving me one, I'm making the best use of it. and I lost it. Well, so I'm here to share with you my experience of like taking part in this resettlement process as a case manager, a case specialist, and a recipient of these services. Before I talk about that, I would like to share a bit about myself and my push factors, like what pushed me out of my country. I was born and raised in a village located near the borderlines to India and Burma, and and that village is in like Chin State, we speak like several dialects in our state, and I decided to learn English because I love Hollywood movies, and I really wanted to understand what really is going on. Instead of assuming what's going on, I really wanted to know. So I started studying English after I finished my matriculation exam, and then to study in college, I moved to Rangoon, and over there I took part in 2007 infamous saffron revolutions, which was led by the monk. And after that revolutions, I had to make a choice, a difficult choice, whether to go study in the Philippines or to be in jails. So I decided to be a good boy and study in the Philippines. I studied political science for 5 years. After 5 grueling years, I graduated and I went back home. And what I did was that, I collaborated with student organizations and churches to educate people on our newly drafted constitutions. Because that constitutions apparently guarantee people of right to religions, and freedom to forms, a freedom to do human rights and right to religions, and freedom to express your opinions. But in our part of Burma, those rights were not given to us. And I wanted people to know that they are, as equal citizens of Burma, they also had this right. And I talked to them about it, and I formed a small discussion group every night after church services, and we have this discussion group for youth, and apparently I needed permissions or permit from the captains of the military battalions in Chin State to do that, and I didn't ask for one. When I asked for one, they denied me because they said that you are not allowed to hold political discussions. And I said, it's not political, it's educational. But he said that I do not have the right to do that because I am not from the government. I'm not working for the government. And then, we try other methods like distributing pamphlets or distributing pamphlets, and I spent. As a result, I spent 3 nights in jail, and I was given a choice again, either to be in the country or to spend, like either to flee from, leave the countries or spend my time in jails. And well, I do not want to be in military jails. If it's civil jails, I would go, but if it's, since that's the military jails, I didn't want to stay, so I left. I traveled to Malaysia. And part of the other main reason why I left is that they confiscated my national identification card. So in order to live in Myanmar, in order to travel in Myanmar, even if you're a citizen, you need your national identification card. If I want to spend a night at my mom's house and I don't have my national identification card, I am considered illegal. And they literally took away my citizenship when they confiscated my national identification card. So I had to leave, and I traveled to Malaysia because Malaysia does not directly deport people back to Myanmar because it's costly. So they instead dump them at Thailand, so people can keep coming back. So I decided to travel to Malaysia, and I had this opportunity to work for IRC, International Rescue Committee. I worked for them for 3 years as an interpreter, and then I resettled to U.S. And well, the first person that I met in Kansas City International Airport was Ram Powell. He is my case manager. He was my case manager, and the first thing that he said to me and my wife was that you're now safe, and that still echo in my ears. Well, because in Malaysia I was illegal, and I was always under constant threat of being in detentions or being in jails. Malaysia government does not recognize me as a refugee. Malaysia government does not recognize me as a person in danger. They saw me as an illegal, and they saw me as undocumented illegal immigrants. So I was always under constant threat, and since I finally got the opportunity to settle to U.S., I took it, and I came here with my wife. And when Ram said that to me, that you're now safe, it was I can't even describe it. It's the feeling is amazing, and they helped me out with my transitions to new life in the U.S. and it's been a pleasant ride. I can't really complain. I can't even ask for better than this. After being here for 2 months, I almost got all of my documents like Social Security card, my public benefit, and then I also got opportunity to work for these wonderful organizations. They took me as a case aide, and I jumped into the opportunity. I applied for it, and they took me as a case aide. I worked for them, and then finally, I now work for Cathy Charity as receptions and placement case specialist. What I'm trying to say is that my resettlement process is a lot smoother and a lot more than what I expected. And well, it's all about me achieving self-sufficiency, and I finally can say that I achieve self-sufficiency, and now I can pay back to the society in the U.S. As a contributing member. So, thank you.
Okay, I'm on. All right, so now you've heard what happens with refugee resettlement, and let's talk a little bit about the distinctions of term. A refugee is somebody who is fleeing persecution or war in their country, and they get assigned that status before coming to the U.S. And that's a little bit in contrast to an asylum seeker, an asylee, who actually comes and seeks that protection once they are in our U.S. borders. So I'm going to talk a little bit about bringing this discussion a little bit closer to home. What happens when somebody flees persecution in their homeland and comes to the U.S. without having gone through the resettlement, comes to our borders and asks for our nation's protection here. Over the last 3 or so years, we have seen a major influx of asylum seekers, primarily from Latin America, primarily from the Triangle countries, which are Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. And we have seen an influx of women and children, sometimes mothers with their babies, and sometimes unaccompanied minors. Why do they flee, you ask? Well, because these are all but war zones that these folks live in. Does anybody have any inkling in what the murder rate is in the U.S. per capita? So per 100,000 residents in the U.S., the murder rate, but nationwide, is about 4.5 murders per 100,000 citizens. Would anybody like to guess what the murder rate is in Honduras? Well, actually, in El Salvador. It's about 39, so not that bad, but it is tenfold to the murder rate in the U.S. In Guatemala, it's about the same. In Honduras, 98. So it is about as tragic a situation as you can be living in without being in a war zone, without being in Syria. So people risk everything to come to safety, as all of humanity has done. When fleeing persecution, this is not something new. It is in our very nature to seek safety, to seek a better life, to seek to better our circumstances. So a lot of these women and children have come to our borders, fleeing. I don't know how. It boggles my mind. I do not think you could drop me off in the middle of Guatemala and I would find my way back here. But these women, persevere, and they find their way to the United States, and oftentimes, sometimes with the help of smugglers, or coyotes, as they're colloquially called, and sometimes the coyotes themselves tell them to turn themselves in to immigration, to border patrol, in essence, saying there is somebody who, there's the U.S. government, go get yourself some help. And they do. Sometimes they're told even from back in their homes, saying they're told that the U.S. is helping, women and children in their situation. I mean, these are dire situations. So a lot of these women come and they show up at our border when they meet somebody, and they approach somebody who's a government officer, and they ask for asylum, they ask for protection. And the first thing they get is pretty much cuffed and put in the back of a border patrol vehicle, and taken to a place they lovingly refer to as the hielera, the ice box, because it is basically a concrete frozen box. I've heard stories of women who, maybe get caught in a storm like this. They find somebody at border patrol, and that's how they are for 24 days. They're not given a change of clothes or anything to any protection. They just live in the ice box. From there, from a couple of days there, they're transferred to another place they called the Perrera, the doghouse. And when you ask the women and children why it's called the doghouse, it's because they say, well, that's how we're treated. We're told that that's what we're worth, if that. From the ice box and the doghouse, they're taken to a family detention center, which sounds like Club Med, but it's not at all. So Immigration and Customs Enforcement has, under the Department of Homeland Security, has built these family detention centers that they call residential centers, but the practitioners, we call them baby jails, because that's what they are. They are in the most remote areas as can be. Actually, the one that I went to one in the middle of Texas. It is literally next to a maximum security prison. It is. So they're taking to these residential centers that are in the middle of nowhere. These women and children don't know where they are. Women with children are processed differently than unaccompanied adults, than unaccompanied minors. So, for example, if mom is traveling with her kid, her husband, but also her baby, her little sister who's 15, dad's going to be sent to one detention, mom and kid are going to be sent to one detention center, and minor sister is going to be sent to somewhere else. So that's a truly tragic situation, and it could be, mom and kid are in Texas and dad's in Pennsylvania. So that's what happens. These detention centers are basically a collection of FEMA trailers, just an array of FEMA trailers that the government tries to make all cutesy by calling this is the brown bear neighborhood, this is the green turtle neighborhood, this is the purple butterfly neighborhood. But I mean, you're still in jail. Everything's still controlled. Meal times are controlled. They're not given access to, they're not given access to counsel. Very, very ill-advised. Often intimidated. And these detention centers are privately run. They are, for the most part, run by a company, one of two companies, a company called GEO Group, and a company called CCA, Corrections Corporation of America. These companies are so great at their treatment of immigrants that CCA has been successfully sued by the ACLU for how lousy their installations are. So and this is a racket. By statute, it is written in our statute, in our laws, that immigration has to detain a certain number of people per night. It is written into our law that immigration must have 34,000 immigrants locked up per night. So at a cost of about $230 a head. So do the math, it's good business. So at the detention center, again, a lot of these women, legally what happens is when these women are detained by ICE or Border Patrol, obviously it's quite obvious that they're entering the country without documentation, and so the first thing that they get is an order of deportation, just legally. Hi, welcome. Boop, boot out the door. So the first thing that they get is legally ordered deported, and they will be deported back to their home country unless they know to claim asylum. Tell me how many women from the jungles of Honduras know that they need to do this. But if they claim asylum, then they get to go through something called a credible fear interview, where they are interviewed by an asylum officer. This is not so bad. Asylum officers are, they're not they're thorough investigators, but they're not. Their job is not to be intimidating. It would be more like a, maybe like a social work interview. But they try to get deep into the heart of whether somebody has a true fear of returning to their country. Now, this can't just be any fear. It has to be a fear based on, persecution based on religion, race, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. So again, figure out how somebody from El Salvador, how a 14-year-old from El Salvador is going to articulate this. We do not make this easy. So if there is a positive, credible fear finding, if the interviewing officer determines that there is the person has a fear of persecution, a reasonable fear of persecution, then that opens up the possibility of them being able to defend their case in court. Not win it, just have the chance to fight it, to even get there without being kicked back to your home country first. So now these women are in detention. When the influx of women and children started, and a lot of these women got detained in centers like the one where I volunteered in Dilley, Texas. Obviously, there was a need for immigration judges to, once it was determined that these women could fight their cases, well, now there's not really a need for them to be in jail. They're bondable. They can bond out. Unfortunately, for many of the women and children, the judges in the beginning were setting bonds in about $15,000, $25,000. I don't have that in the bank. I don't know that, again, an indigenous woman from Guatemala is going to have that either. So it might as well be $1 million. So this all was happening before volunteer attorneys like myself were able to just fly down to Dilley and represent these women. Because there is actually, there's a right to representation in immigration court. You can be represented, but it's not a constitutional right. It's not, it's not our Sixth Amendment right to representation, not as if you were in a criminal proceeding. You can have an attorney, but not at the government's expense. So, again, and if you're not represented, there's about a 98% likelihood that you're not gonna be able to fight your case successfully. So a lot of volunteer attorneys started organizing and going down to these detention centers and helping represent these women in their bond proceedings, helping explain to them what their rights were. And towards the end, we started getting bonds of $1,500, $2,000, $3,000. A lot more manageable for women and children who often had family and, friend connections here in the United States. Certainly more manageable than $20,000. So that gets them at least released. Once they're released, their cases, again, we've only just begun. So once they are released, they still have to know to formally file an asylum application before the immigration court, and then of course they have their trial. Asylum cases are horrible. I'm a newbie attorney, but I don't like them. If it's tough for me to articulate, legal basis for asylum for somebody, I don't know how somebody unrepresented can do it. And they're tough. Judges are tough, as in the criminal system. Most of the immigration judges are former prosecutors, so there's that mentality. And again, there's no automatic right to representation. The women would have to know to get counsel. Lawyers, it's not cheap or easy to find representation for asylum cases. So these are uphill battles from the get-go. Fortunately, the volunteer attorneys that have been working on these projects have had a really good success rate with these cases. Because why? Because these are legitimate refugees. These are legitimate asylum seekers. These are legitimate cases. These are men, women, and children that have been persecuted in their homeland by gang members. They've been, threatened. They've been women who have suffered horrendous domestic violence. My most recent asylum case was a young girl from Guatemala whose boyfriend beat her so badly that he literally made her miscarry her baby. So that's and when she fled, she didn't know it, but she was pregnant again. She came to find out that she was pregnant when she was inspected by a border officer, and of course she did not want to go back and have to face her abuser again. So these again are legitimate victims. These are not the rapists and murderers and drug dealers that some presidential candidates are accusing these women of being. But we don't treat them as such. I mean, you heard Rachel talk about the benefits and the eligibility of access to services that somebody who's resettled already been named or determined to be a refugee from the country, there's a lot of assistance for services. Here there's nothing. And again, fighting the cases in the courts. You're looking at indigenous women. I saw indigenous women. One of them spoke a language called Chuch. I had never heard of Chuch. You've probably never heard of Chuch. The reason you probably never heard of Chuch is because it's spoken by 40,000 people in the world. So, how is a Chuch speaker going to be able to, with very, very limited Spanish, even going to be able to articulate the horrors that she's lived through? Not very well. So there are a lot of challenges, even in the detention centers for the volunteer attorneys who went there. I described the experience as death by 1,000 paper cuts, because it just seemed like every day the system did something to try and make your situation more difficult. I mean, just minutia that volunteer attorneys were scolded for, like, giving a snack to a kid or giving a kid some paper and crayons to scribble on. These were considered like safety hazards. And again, I volunteered at a detention center for women and children where the volunteers got scolded at for wearing sleeveless shirts. We were volunteering in a Texas desert in May. I certainly don't think we were awakening anybody's, prurient interest. So, but it's very, very difficult for asylum seekers here in the U.S. I'm not saying that it's an easy road for asylum or refugee seekers anywhere, but when you hear the rhetoric, especially in this campaign about basically people just wanting to come here, abuse the system, and that is so not the case. Every person that's come through my door with one of these cases, they want safety and security, and yes, they want to work, but that's because they want, they're tough and they want to contribute, just like Johan. But that's the situation. So I guess I'll take remarks now, and thank you.
Okay. I'm gonna save the hardest question for last, and you'll know why when you hear it. You can hear me a little better. Can you hear me?
We can hear you anyway.
Why, it kind of went off, didn't it?
Do you want one of these, and we can split the other mic between?
Well, I think
You can hear.
it shows that it's on, but I don't know why it's not working. I think, can you all hear me? I think we're, yeah. first question, when families are sent to different detention centers, do they know where the others are? I assume particularly family members.
Maybe not. It's tough, especially if they don't have a third-party family member that's trying to, kind of keep track of everybody. Because again, if you're detained in, Laredo or on or around Laredo, Texas, again, mom and kid will be sent to one, and anybody who's an unaccompanied minor will get resettled through the Office of Refugee Resettlement that sends you to some sort of home. It's just a mess. And, so ICE officers are not always very forthcoming with information, shocker.
Here's one that asks, how are asylum seekers expecting to be treated when they get to the border? Are they lied to by the coyotes? If they do come back, why do they want to?
They come back after they've been deported?
After deportation, yes.
Well, I mean, we've had cases of re-victimization. It's not uncommon for a woman to flee an abuser. They come here, they are deported, and only to reface victimization. In that case, it's even a little bit more difficult because if you've been deported before, your chances for relief are more limited. And I don't know how they expect to be treated. I don't think they're expecting a red carpet welcome mat, but certainly not to be harassed just from the get-go.
And while we're working on the on the microphone, I think we need a new battery there. How did the volunteer attorneys help? I think we've heard some of that, but how long do detainees remain in custody? What's sort of the range on that?
It really varies. Some of the women when we were there had been there for months, because again they're not told. Like, we were there as volunteer attorneys, but we were only allowed to go into the visitation trailer. We couldn't go through the center again, but it's a residential center. It's Club Med. So a lot of the women didn't even know that there were free attorneys there, ready, willing, and able to help them. They had to go. They had to learn of us through word of mouth and whispers, which was really tough. I don't know, what was the question? I forgot the rest of it.
Well, I think you got it.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Governor Brownback has declared Kansas, and this just came out, I think, today. A lot of you may have heard of this. Declared Kansas will not take part in allowing immigrants, and I'm assuming that's refugees mainly, to come to Kansas. First, can he declare that on his own? Second, what would happen to immigrants/refugees if they came to Kansas and got caught?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll take that one.
You might want to.
So this is really new, and I think we're still kind of figuring out what all it's going to mean. Immigration is a federal thing, and we don't have state borders with border checkpoints. So refugees and immigrants are free to travel the country just like you and I are, and the governor's his stance won't stop refugee resettlement in the state of Kansas. I think we're still waiting to see. We're still waiting to see what it's going to look like. The state has played an administrative role, and I think he's saying that he does not want the state to play that administrative role anymore.
But it's dumb, and tell him it's dumb. The bill, I think, that he had proposed, and I wish I had the bill number, but there was a bill proposed to say that an entity within Kansas, be it a municipality or a county, could basically say that they don't have the resources to be able to support a refugee population, again, two families resettled in Casey. Again, this is a ridiculous argument. So,
did we address enough of what would happen to the immigrants or refugees if they came to Kansas and got caught? At this point, is there something in that legislation that addresses that?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's nothing legal, but I mean, just think of the fear.
Yeah.
I've had clients tell me that when they leave for work in the morning, they basically kiss their family goodbye because they don't know if they're going to make it back.
Mm-hmm.
The next question, what are the circumstances that allow any illegal immigrant from requesting asylum if they were stopped by police?
Legally, to request asylum, you have to file. You have to request asylum within 1 year of your arrival in the United States. So if Maria is, has been here for a couple of years, and she's driving her kids to school, and she gets pulled over, and gets transferred into immigration and put into deportation proceedings. Then we're kind of in a scramble to try and figure out whether there's any relief from deportation available. It might be asylum. It might be asylum's stepsister, which is called withholding of removal. It's basically the same thing, just less benefits. Or there might be something else.
Rachel, did you want to add anything to that?
No.
Okay. If our church wants to sponsor a Syrian refugee family, what are some of the initial steps to make a connection with a family?
Mm-hmm. I can take that one. So, the refugee program in the U.S. used to really be built around this idea of sponsorship, church and parish sponsorship. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, there wasn't kind of the local agencies like us that provided the case management services. So we don't have like a formal sponsorship program for refugees to pair them up with a church. What we do have is a lot of volunteer opportunities, a lot of opportunities for folks to connect. And so I'm happy to talk with folks about if anyone's interested. I can get your email and send you a document that we have all the ways that you can get involved. And in terms of wanting specifically to work with folks from Syria, we don't have anyone in our pipeline from Syria that's scheduled to travel. That might change in the future. We serve whoever the State Department sends our way. But right now, we don't have any folks scheduled to travel.
Something recently that I was reading about stated that of the 71,000 immigrants, that was I think that was in about a little over a year time period. That 80% of those were sent to family members or sponsors that did not have legal status. And it's not a requirement that they have legal status. So the question now is, and are you all working with any of these families to help them plan if in fact some of the political climate ends up deporting some of these families that have these children? Is that anything that you all are starting to look at and see that obviously here are these children?
Are you talking about the unaccompanied minors? Is that?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, that have been placed in homes. And of course, it's always preferable, as they say, to place them with someone they know culturally or a family member.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so for unaccompanied minors, I mean that's difficult, right? What do you do with a 12-year-old whose only connection is mom's cousin that he knows lives somewhere in this weird place called Olathe? If there's no other, unaccompanied minors again are sort of managed by the Office of Refugee Resettlement, and they're the agency that's responsible for making sure that these kiddos are okay. But there's not really any follow up or follow through on that. It's yeah, it is a risk, and it has actually happened to me before that a kid got resettled with mom's cousin or somebody, and mom's cousin ended up getting deported. But fortunately for that kid, there was a community network that knew his situation, and he ended up getting a guardian, somebody who was willing to step up and become a legal guardian. And that's actually, another need. There are, unaccompanied minors that could use legal guardians if it is not in their best interest to be reunited with one or both of their parents based on having suffered some sort of abandonment, abuse, or neglect. It's a big ask for somebody to step up and be a legal guardian to one of these kids, but that's an option.
And we, Catholic Charities, through the Office of Refugee Resettlement, we provide case management to those cases. It's on a much more limited scale. Basically, when we get a referral for a kid that's, going to be removed from detention, and if they have someone they're reuniting within like a 2-hour radius of Kansas City, then they get referred to us. We've only had about 10 cases this past year, and the requirements of that are just doing like a pre-release home study with the family, and then we have to do 6-month check-ins until they turn 18. So it's basically just referrals for those kids. It's not super in-depth case management.
Okay, thank you. Well, here's the big one for you all to ponder, all of us. How do we combat the current political rhetoric targeting immigrants and refugees?
So, yeah, I'll start. I think people change their mind when they meet people and when they have a personal relationship. So, I think talking about what you learned tonight, I think volunteering, try and get as many people as you can connected, because, people say bad things about immigrants and refugees, but then as soon as they meet them, I feel like it totally changes, because we're all human, and when you actually know somebody, have kind of a strange story, but I have some people in my family. I have family members that are really supportive of the work that I do, and also family members that question the work that I do. And last year we have an annual World Refugee Day celebration, which you would all be invited to. It's either June 4th or June 6th, whichever is the Saturday. But last year, some of my family came to this event, and I'm this unnamed family member, because we're being recorded. I'm not gonna, we had different cultural presentations, and at the end, this little girl, I was running the soundboard. I was trying to do a little too much. So I was, plugging everybody, all the dance teams, different iPhones into the thing and trying to find the song. And this little girl from Iraq, we had resettled her family about 2 years ago. She came up and threw an iPad in my face and said, "I want to sing the song." And so I plugged it in and I pressed play. And she wanted to sing, "I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free." And my family member is sitting there just bawling, just like, and it's changed for him now. And he always references that as the changing point for him. So I think, as much as we can, humanizing each other, getting to know each other, talking with people, learning people's stories. These are really complicated issues, but I think the more we can keep talking about it, the more we can meet people, and I would also say, all this stuff in the news about backlash, Syrian refugees, people, all this kind of stuff. I honestly have heard very little negative stuff from people when I'm out in the community, and tons of people that want to help, and tons of people that, so I don't know, I feel like the media and what's real is kind of, a little different, yeah. So, I don't know. If anybody else wants to.
Yeah, so immigration attorneys have a National Day of Action in D.C., which was a few weeks ago, and, they'd meet with congressional members. And what the representatives that were sent this year were told time and again is that they hear a lot from constituents who disagree with, pro-immigrant stances. They don't hear a lot from people who want to help. They don't hear a lot from the positive side, from the people that have met, members of their immigrant community and know that we're not all big scary monsters. So speak up first and foremost. When you hear about these negative bills that are proposed in nationally or in Kansas. Speak up when people make nasty, snide comments. Get out and meet folks, and I guess that'll bring me to an opportunity. AIRR, Advocates of Immigrant Rights and Reconciliation, which is my other hat, right now is hosting monthly walks. We're taking these walks around town, doing them from 2 different churches, within the KC area. We've done from Cathy's church in KCK. We've done Midtown in Kansas City, Missouri. We've done where else?
Argentine.
We've done the Argentine neighborhood, and the walks are always on the 11th day of the month. So it's predictable. The time changes a little bit because sometimes it's a weekday, sometimes it's a weekend. But our May walk is actually going to be in Olathe. It is going to be May 11th. It's going to be at 5:30 p.m. It'll start from the El Centro offices, which are right there on Santa Fe, at 500 East Santa Fe. And we'll probably be walking to either the square or the Second Baptist Church in Olathe. So it's always, less than a mile walk. You'll be walking with members of the immigrant community, getting to know their stories, hearing them share their stories. And if Asbury wants to host a walk, find a partner church, within a good radius, and contact me about hosting. There's plenty of 11th days of the month left. These walks began as a movement through an national organization called We Belong Together. And back when the Pope came in September, I believe, of last year, 100 women, a group of women walked 100 miles from a detention center in Pennsylvania all the way to D.C. To meet with the Pope and the President and share how our broken immigration system has, broken their families. So we're taking up the torch and picking up where they left off and walking, about a mile every month. So feel free to join us. And, if you're interested in hosting a walk, talk amongst yourselves and then let me know.
Thank you, Catalina. I would emphasize once again the importance of stories. That's how we really get to know what people's journeys are. We were so privileged to hear from Johan. Not too long ago, I know many of you are probably familiar with Nuns on the Bus. And Catalina and AIRR set up a couple of families to talk to the nuns about their stories and their journeys. And the nuns took this all the way as far as they could to help with, even to Washington, to help with one of the families. It became very difficult. But that even a group like Nuns on the Bus, which are geared into this kind of action and stories, were so impacted when they met these families. And one was a grandmother who was, taking care of her grandchildren.
Her 7 grandkids,
Yes.
because mom and dad had both been deported.
Yes. So once again, telling the stories, learning the stories, communicating those stories, and also I think there's got to be ways, and you all would be important resources, and so would some of you out in the audience. Let's see how we can help schools and teachers talk about the reality of what the political process should be, and try to reassure some of these children and families and teachers as they're facing this escalation of fear and bullying. And I would encourage any of you who have connections with the school or have relatives that have connections with the schools to reach out and see if there's a way that you can help. We do have a little time left. I don't know if we want to let everybody go early or if we want to take some questions.
I know we don't usually take out to us regularly about these walks the 11th of the month. Because I'm old and I'll forget between
And I should have brought flyers, but
nice
I'll
things to know about so that we can, get behind some of this stuff.
absolutely. I'll get some flyers to Cathy. If any of you are on social media, on Facebook, it would be facebook.com / AIRRKC. AIRRKC. Facebook.com / AIRRKC. Or bug Cathy and she'll get a hold of me.
Yeah, I'm always willing to be bugged. Yeah, in a variety of ways. No. Sue.
Rachel mentioned something happening on June 4th or 6th, whichever was. But where is it?
It is.
Tell us a little more
Yeah, let's
about
look it up here. So World Refugee Day is just it's on the 4th. It's just a celebration of resilience in the refugee communities in Kansas City. It will be at the Armory on 18th Street in KCK, and it's from 1 to 4. At 1 o'clock will be we have a lot of refugee folks that play volleyball, so we're having a staff versus refugee volleyball. It'll be a short tournament, and then we'll have cultural performances, food, and lots of different booths. So we'd love to have all of you join us.
And you say that's the 4th.
Yep, 1 to 4 is the time.
And I'm going to be turning this over to Ann, but one of the things as we do these forums and as Mainstream does these forums, we always want to have a way to encourage you to take action. Hopefully you've learned some things that have impacted you, and I've kind of thrown some ideas out there, whether it's the walk, whether just communicating to others what you heard here today. All of those things can make a difference. So get out there, take action. And we want to truly be, and AIRR is a member of that, welcoming Kansas. It may not seem that way right now, but we can make it that way. So thank you very much.